Shabbat Shalom.
Drasha.
So, as I mentioned, during the weeks leading up to Passover, there are 4 Shabbatot when we read a special maftir, and this is the last of them, and it always falls on the Shabbat before Rosh Chodesh Nisan. And each of the 4 special maftirs in some way serves the purpose of helping us to prepare for the upcoming festival, or more accurately, reminding us of something we need to do to prepare for the upcoming festival. So this morning, we read HaChodesh, which is from chapter 12 of Exodus, and we read it because this section contains the instructions for the sacrifice of the Paschal Lamb, the Korban Pesach, and we no longer perform such a sacrifice because there's no temple. But if the temple were standing, each family would be reminded by this special reading that we have to go about obtaining our lamb, okay, which I have no idea. I mean, I know where you can buy lamb, but I don't know where you could buy a lamb, right? But, we don't do this sacrifice, but just as a matter of interest, the Samaritans still do. Right? I'm not going to get into all who are the Samaritans, whatever, but they still perform this sacrifice on Mount Gerizim, which is just outside of Shechem or Nablus. And in better times, that's actually like a big tourist attraction. Lots of Israelis, as well as lots of Christians from throughout the world, go and observe the Samaritan Passover sacrifice. I expect that this year, probably not so many tourists, but if you want to see what this was like, okay, go to YouTube, type in Samaritan Passover, and you'll see what it was like, okay? It wasn't pleasant for the lambs, but I don't think it was, personally, I don't find it pleasant, but I do find it interesting. Okay, at any rate, the commandment of the Korban Pesach is considered by the sages to be the first commandment specifically addressed to the Jewish people, right? Say, well, there's tons of commandments prior to it, right? Yes, there are. But prior to Exodus 12, every commandment in the Torah was addressed either to a specific individual or to humanity as a whole. Okay, but from this point forward, we have mitzvot given to Am Yisrael, to the people of Israel. Okay, so Rashi, in his very first comment to the Torah, on Genesis 1:1, entertains the view of Rabbi Yitzchak that the Torah really should have begun with Exodus 12:1. Okay, there was a sage in the Talmud who said the Torah really should have begun with Exodus 12:1. Okay, now why would he say that, right? And the reason that he would say that is, according to this view, right, the purpose of the Torah is to serve as the rule book of the Jewish people, right? And if the Torah is simply the rule book of the Jewish people, everything prior to HaChodesh was unnecessary, okay? Now, I was originally ordained a Reform rabbi, and I switched to the conservative movement. And people often ask me what prompted me to make that switch. right? And the brief answer is that through my studies in rabbinical school, I became convinced that halakha, Jewish law, is a necessary part of Judaism, right? But I'm very careful to say a necessary part of Judaism because Judaism is more than halakha, right? There are some Jews to our right who basically believe that Judaism is halakha and only halakha. For example, I read a very learned essay about once by an Orthodox rabbi who asked, is there an ethic independent of the halakha? Right? I mean, or is everything to be found in the halakha? And the view that Rashi considers in his first comment is basically a Talmudic equivalent to certain Haredi or ultra-Orthodox tendencies which exist today. But Rashi, of course, rejects this view, and he brings a number of different viewpoints as to what the purpose of the Torah really is, and why the book of Genesis and the first 11 chapters of the Exodus are not a waste of time, ink, and parchment. All right? And of course, we know that Judaism is more than just law, right? And as conservative Jews, we understand that while Judaism of necessity has a system of laws, even if we also know that most Jews observe these laws only in part and very selectively, right? But Judaism is much more than only a system of laws. It's language, literature, music, ethics, food, humor. It is the state of Israel and our responsibility to our fellow Jews all over the world. If you look at the priorities of our shul, or almost any shul in the world, you'll see recognition of that basic fact, right? I mean, programs on Jewish music, programs on Jewish humor, programs about Israel, things that we do to help Jews in Israel, things that we do to help Jews in other countries. And it's not like we have a checklist that we, right. It just comes naturally to us. It's what we do as Jews because Judaism is all those things, right? So Rashi rejects the suggestion that the purpose of the Torah is merely to give rules to the Jewish people, right? So what else is at work here? Okay, now Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, in his book, The Dignity of Difference, notes that the Torah begins not with the story of the Jewish people, right? It doesn't say, Bereshit bara Elohim et am Yisrael, right? In the beginning, God created the Jewish people, right? It says, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Right? It's the story of all humanity, right? And God is not just the God of the Jewish people, but the God of all humanity. And if that is the case, Judaism is not just about our concern for the Jewish people, but our concern for all humanity. So the Torah moves from the story of God's relationship with all of humanity, and then it narrows down to God's relationship with one particular family, right? Abraham and Sarah and their descendants. And then it broadens again to God's relationship with one particular group of people, Am Yisrael. God is concerned for our people, and God is concerned for all humanity, and there's no contradiction, right? And if God can do both of those things, and we're created in the image of God, we can do both of those things as well. And, it's interesting to me. I mean, I did not read the commentary on the Haftarah that Stu read this morning until this morning. But at the very end of that commentary, Professor Michael Fishbane makes precisely the same point about this Haftarah. Right? He says in the Torah, in this reading, right, we put blood on the lintels of our house. Right? In the Haftarah, we put blood on the lintels of the temple. Right? So there's obviously a connection between the two, between our home and the temple, but there's also a contrast or a tension, right? The home is about family, right? It is about people who are tied by kinship of blood and who share a name, right? Whereas the temple is about the entire people, and beyond that, by extension, right? My house shall be called a house of prayer for all peoples, right? It's about all of humanity, right? And we are called to live in our house, and we're called to live in the temple, right? And there's a tension, but we can do both, right? And, as Hillel put it, right? If I am not for myself, who will be for me, right? But if I'm only for myself, what am I? The Imloach Shav Ematai, not now, when? Shabbat Shalom. Continue with the